Hello, and a very good evening to you all. Welcome to episode 5 of our discussion, Abraham from birth till death. Episode 4 was a bit long and we decided to split it in two. So we have episode 4A and 4B. Please endeavor to watch both. We've discussed quite some, we've covered quite a lot about Abraham so far. In our last episode, we discussed how Abraham escaped death by the hand of King Nimrod, first by the burning furnace, and how a second attempt was made on his life. But his servant Eliezer tipped him off and advised him to leave the land immediately, which Abraham hearkened to, and left first for the house of Noah and his son Shem, and hid there for about a month, and then decided to go to the land of Canaan for the fear of being killed by the king Nimrod. Now, watch my choice of word. I said he decided, because at this time God hadn't appeared to Abraham, though even from his birth he has been the one orchestrating every event. Nothing has happened without the knowledge of God, but he hasn't appeared to Abraham yet. And so when Abraham decided to leave, he convinced his father Terah to embark on the journey with him. At first, Terah refused because of his possessions as a prince of the land. But when Shem and his father Noah added their voices, he eventually agreed and made the journey with Abraham. So Terah took everything and everyone, they packed everything, family, everything they own in the land, and left for Canaan. But when they went as far as the land of Aram, they saw that the pasture there was good for their livestock, and that there was expanse of land to accommodate them and everyone with them. So they decided to stay there. Abraham ended up staying 3 years there with the entire family. And at the end of 3 years, God appeared to Abraham for the first time and told him, I am the God that saved you from the hands of your enemies, and I am the God that have led you this far. Now, leave this land and go to the land of Canaan. That is the land I'm going to give to you and your seed. I'm going to make your seed, your descendants, as numerous and as countless as the stars of the heavens. It is in Canaan that I'll bless you. Abraham hearkened to the voice of the Lord, took his wife, Sarah, and the men that came with him from Ur of the Chaldeans. Now, I particularly said the men that came with him because he had made disciples there in Haran. Because when the people of Haran saw that Abraham was favored in the sight of men and God, some men actually joined his faith. They left their houses, came to Abraham's house, and were living with him, obeying all his instructions. So when he was leaving for Canaan rather, he left those men behind. Now, this is where the confusion is about Abraham, about the age Abraham was when God called him out of Haran to Canaan. We're going to take it step by step. Now, Abraham, when he left Ur of Kasdim to Haran, was 52. He stayed 3 years in Haran before God appeared to him and told him to leave for Canaan. So when Abraham was leaving for Canaan the first time, he was 55 years old when he left for Canaan. When he was leaving for Canaan, his father Terah, his elder brother Nahor, and his nephew Lot stayed behind in Haran with their entire families and their belongings. They stayed behind. They didn't go with Abraham on this journey. So Lot was not with Abraham on the first journey Abraham made to Canaan. So he went to Canaan and settled in the midst of the city, amongst the children of Canaan, that's the inhabitants of the land. And he stayed there for a long time. It was 3 years after Abraham first got to Canaan, when Abraham was 58 years of age, that Noah, the servant of God, died at the age of 950 years. Abraham was just 3 years in Canaan then. And God appeared to Abraham and said, "This is the land that I'm going to give to you and your seed." That was the second time God was appearing to Abraham. And Abraham built there an altar and worship and called on the name of God there in that land. In the 5th year of Abraham living in the land of Canaan, the people of Sodom, Gomorrah, and all the cities in the plain revolted against a king called Chedorlaomer. Okay, it's quite a long name, and for the benefit of this class, we'll call him Shadow. Please permit me to use that. His actual name is Chedorlaomer. Okay, we'll just call him Chedo. Now, this king Chedorlaomer, let me try to pronounce it, was a prince, one of the princes of the king Nimrod. Now, at a time when he was still in obedience, still paying homage to the king Nimrod, he led a war against Sodom, Gomorrah, and all the cities surrounding them, subdued them, and brought them under subjection to him. Now, when he succeeded in doing that, he revolted against the king Nimrod and became lord over other kings in his own ranks. And all these kings were paying taxes, yearly taxes to him, because they were not under him. And he decided not to be under Nimrod, the king Nimrod, anymore. But in the 5th year of Abraham living in the land of Canaan, and that is after 12 years of Sodom, Gomorrah, and all other cities being under subject of the king Chedorlaomer, these cities together revolted and decided not to pay homage to the king Chedorlaomer. So his kingdom was now less because so many kings pulled out of under him. And so when the king Nimrod saw this, he saw it as an opportunity to get back at the king Chedorlaomer, either kill him or bring him under subjection to him again. So in the 10th year of Abraham living in the land of Canaan, the king Nimrod came out to war with Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam. And he came out with all his host and all the kings under him. His soldiers and hosts were so many, about 700,000 armed soldiers came out to war against Chedorlaomer. And Chedorlaomer came up to fight against the king, and he came out with just 5,000 men. Now, 5,000 men against 700,000. They met in the valley of Babel, which was the border between Shinar and Elam. And the battle was so fierce. But Chedorlaomer dealt a devastating blow on the king Nimrod. 600,000 men of the king Nimrod's host fell in that battle. So Chedorlaomer won the battle, and King Nimrod fled with the remaining of his men and went back home disgraced and subdued. From then on, he was now a subject to the king Chedorlaomer. And since King Nimrod has fallen, Sodom, Gomorrah, and the other cities in the plain all fell back to the king Chedorlaomer. Sorry about that, please. And so from then on, Chedorlaomer was now in charge. King Nimrod now to have to pay homage back to him. And Chedor sent princes to now be in charge of these kingdoms and rule over all other kings. Now, in the 15th year of Abraham living in the land of Canaan, when he saw that the king Nimrod had been subdued, he decided to visit Haran, to go back and visit his parents and his people. So he went with everyone that he has brought out of Haran to Canaan some 15 years ago. So Abraham is going back to Haran now after 15 years, which means he is now 70, leaving the land of Canaan to go back to Haran. So he went back to Haran and settled amongst his people again. And other men, about 72 of them, joined his host again, joined his household again from amongst the people of Haran. They lived with him. So Abraham lived large, had a lot of servants, and they were all intermarrying and raising children for him. All the children, as his servant, belongs to Abraham. And Abraham multiplied and was favored of God. And he spent 5 years again in Haran. And at the end of 5 years, God appeared to Abraham again and told him to leave Haran and go back to Canaan. For it is in Canaan that he, God, will bless Abraham. The land he's giving him, not Haran, but Canaan, where his seed will inherit forever. His fourth generation will return back to the land and possess it forever. And he told him to take everything belonging to him, everyone that was born to him, all his servants, and all the people that he had discipled in Haran. This time, he's not to leave anything or anyone behind. He was to take every one of them with him. And Abraham hearkened to the voice of the Lord, took his wife, Sarai, the men that came with him from Ur of Kasdim, the disciples he had made there in Haran, all his flocks, everything, and was to leave Haran again to return back to the land of Canaan. And this time, Lot, his nephew, joined him. So that's where the confusion is. And this time, Abraham was 75 years of age. So those who argued that Abraham was 75 years when God called him out of Haran to go on to Canaan, yes, they were right. But the first time Abraham actually left Haran for Canaan, he was 55 years of age. So Abraham, his host, and everything belonging to him left Haran and journeyed back to Canaan, leaving behind again his father, his mother, who was still alive, and Terah's household, Nahor and his household. Okay, and he journeyed back to Canaan. At this time, he didn't live in the middle of the Canaanites. He settled in the plain called Mamre, pitched his tents there with his people, and lived there according to the word of God. And this time, his father, Terah, was 145 years. Now, those who argued that Abraham stayed behind in Haran till his father's death got it wrong, because Terah was only 145 years old now. He would live another 60 years. And Terah visited Canaan at some point in the future. And will we get there? But for today, we'll stop it here for today and continue from here in our next class. I hope this has been insightful and enlightening. If it is, please help share this video, like, and we'll welcome your criticism, your contributions, or questions. If there's any area I'm not touching during these teachings, please send us messages, and I'll try as much as possible to go back and talk about it. Okay, because definitely I might have left some areas untouched. If there's any and there are areas you don't understand, do let me know and we'll talk about it. We'll continue from here in our next class. Abraham is now in Canaan. What happens from here forward? We'll discuss it in our next episode, episode 6. Until then, keep listening to the voice of God, and may God bless you richly. Good night.